My name is Elena Hart. I am 32 years old, and 3 nights ago my half-sister slapped me across the face in front of more than 400 wedding guests. The sound echoed through the ballroom so loudly that the music seemed to disappear for a second. People turned toward us. Some gasped, some laughed, others simply watched, waiting to see what I would do next. My cheek burned, but I didn't raise my hand. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I just stood there and looked at her. Then she smiled and called me trash. The crowd laughed even louder. But 30 seconds later, her fiancé stepped forward, looked directly at her, and asked a question that changed everything. Do you have any idea who she really is? Before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand how we got there. The wedding was being held at the Grand Monarch Hotel, one of the most expensive venues in the state. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, golden lights reflected across polished marble floors, and waiters moved through the crowd carrying silver trays filled with champagne. Everything looked perfect. Every detail had been carefully planned to make the evening unforgettable. At least, that was what my half-sister Savannah wanted people to believe. She had spent months showing off the wedding on social media, posting photographs of dresses, decorations, flowers, and expensive gifts. To everyone looking from the outside, she seemed to have the perfect life. Standing alone near the back of the ballroom, I watched guests laugh and celebrate while pretending not to notice me. Honestly, I preferred it that way. I had not seen most of these people in nearly 14 years. Many of them had known me when I was younger. Many of them had watched my family destroy my life and had done absolutely nothing about it. I almost didn't attend the wedding. When the invitation arrived, I stared at it for nearly an hour before opening it. The elegant envelope contained a short note from Savannah herself. She wrote that family should come together during important moments and that she hoped I could attend. Reading those words made me laugh because family was the one thing she had never treated me like. Still, something inside me refused to throw the invitation away. Perhaps I wanted closure. Perhaps I wanted proof that I had finally moved on. Or perhaps I simply wanted to see whether the people who had hurt me so deeply had changed over the years. Looking around the ballroom that evening, I quickly realized the answer. They had not changed at all. When I was 16, my mother died after a long illness. Losing her shattered my world. For months, I felt like I was walking through a fog. My father barely spoke to me during that period. Less than a year later, he married another woman named Linda. She arrived with her daughter Savannah, who was only a year younger than me. At first, I tried very hard to make them feel welcome. I believed we could become a real family. I believed kindness would eventually be returned. Unfortunately, life doesn't always work that way. From the very beginning, Savannah treated our house as if it belonged entirely to her. If she wanted something, she got it. If she complained about something, everyone rushed to fix it. If she made a mistake, someone else was blamed. Most of the time, that someone was me. As the years passed, things became worse. Savannah learned that she could manipulate people whenever she wanted. She cried when she needed attention. She lied when she wanted sympathy. She played the victim so often that eventually everyone believed her automatically. If money disappeared, I was accused. If she broke something valuable, somehow I was responsible. My father never questioned her stories. He always chose the easiest explanation, and the easiest explanation was usually blaming me. I spent years trying to earn his approval. I studied hard. I followed every rule. I stayed quiet whenever Savannah insulted me. Deep down, I thought if I was good enough, eventually someone would notice. No one ever did. The night everything finally collapsed remains as clear in my memory as if it happened yesterday. We were sitting around the dining table during a family gathering when Savannah suddenly burst into tears. Everyone immediately turned toward her. Through sobs, she claimed that I had intentionally ruined an expensive designer dress she planned to wear to an event the following weekend. The accusation made no sense. I had not even touched the dress, but facts didn't matter anymore. My father stood up before I could say a single word. His face was red with anger. He pointed toward the front door and told me to leave. I thought he was joking at first. Then I realized he wasn't. I looked around the table waiting for anyone to defend me. Nobody did. Not my stepmother, not my relatives, not even family friends who had known me since childhood. Everyone remained silent. That silence hurt far more than the accusation itself. I packed a small bag and left that same night. I remember standing outside in the cold, staring at the house where I had spent most of my life. I kept expecting my father to come outside and stop me. I thought he would realize he had made a mistake. He never did. The front door remained closed. The lights stayed on inside while I stood alone in the darkness. That was the night I lost my family. The years that followed were brutal. I worked wherever I could find employment. I cleaned offices after midnight. I waited tables during weekends. I rented tiny rooms with peeling paint and broken furniture. Some months I barely had enough money to eat. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep because I felt completely alone. But every setback taught me something valuable. Every failure forced me to become stronger. While other people were enjoying comfortable lives, I was learning how to survive. Eventually, survival turned into progress. Progress turned into success. And success turned into something far greater than I had ever imagined possible. 14 years later, I stood quietly in the back corner of a luxury ballroom while the people who once dismissed me celebrated Savannah's wedding. None of them knew who I had become. None of them knew what I had built. And honestly, I intended to keep it that way. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there to prove to myself that the past no longer controlled me. Unfortunately, Savannah had other plans. As I stood holding a glass of water, I suddenly heard my name. The voice was sharp enough to cut through the music. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. My stomach tightened immediately because I recognized that tone. Savannah was walking directly toward me with her bridesmaids following behind her. Her smile looked beautiful from a distance, but up close it carried the same cruelty I remembered from years ago. She stopped a few feet away and looked me up and down slowly, examining my simple navy blue dress as if she were inspecting something unpleasant. Then she smiled, and the moment she opened her mouth, I knew this wedding was about to become unforgettable. Savannah stopped directly in front of me, her wedding gown sparkling beneath the ballroom lights while dozens of curious guests watched from nearby tables. For a few seconds she simply stared at me as if she couldn't believe I had actually come. Then a slow smile appeared on her face, the same smile she used to wear whenever she knew she was about to humiliate someone. "Well," she said loudly, making sure everyone around us could hear, "look who decided to show up." A few people laughed quietly, others turned their chairs to get a better view. I kept my expression calm and took a small sip of water. "Congratulations, Savannah," I said. My voice was polite, steady, and completely emotionless. Somehow that seemed to irritate her more than if I had argued. She crossed her arms and tilted her head. "You know, when I sent that invitation, I honestly didn't think you'd come. Then again, maybe you thought this was your chance to finally be part of something important." Several bridesmaids giggled. I remained silent. Over the years, I had learned something powerful. People like Savannah thrive on reactions. If you give them anger, they win. If you give them tears, they win. Silence is the only thing that makes them uncomfortable. Unfortunately, Savannah wasn't interested in stopping. "Tell me something," she continued. "What have you even been doing all these years?" She looked around at the crowd dramatically. "Last time anyone saw you, you were sleeping in cheap apartments and working random jobs. Did that ever change?" More laughter followed. I noticed several guests exchanging awkward glances, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to interfere. The situation reminded me of the night my father threw me out. Different room, different people, same silence. I could have answered her question. I could have told everyone exactly what I had accomplished. I could have described the company I built from nothing, the international contracts I negotiated, the thousands of employees who depended on my organization every day. Instead, I simply smiled. "I'm doing fine," I replied. Savannah rolled her eyes dramatically. "Fine?" she repeated. "That's all you've got? Fine?" Then she leaned closer. "You always were good at pretending things were better than they actually were." The crowd around us continued growing. Weddings have a strange effect on people. The moment conflict appears, everyone suddenly becomes interested. Guests who had been dancing moments earlier were now pretending to chat while secretly listening. Savannah knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted an audience. She wanted to remind everyone of her version of the past. Most importantly, she wanted me to look small. "You know what amazes me?" she said. "After everything that happened, you still have the nerve to show your face around here." The words caused several people to nod. Clearly, whatever story she had been telling over the years was still alive. I slowly placed my glass on a nearby table. "Savannah, it's your wedding day," I said calmly. "You should enjoy it." For a moment, something flashed across her face. Irritation, maybe even frustration. She wanted a fight and I wasn't giving her one. That was when she made a mistake. She stepped closer until only a few inches separated us. "No," she said. "Let's be honest for once. You're here because you want people to notice you. That's always been your problem. You couldn't stand that nobody cared about you." Her voice had become louder now. Guests all around us were openly watching. "The truth is," she continued, "you've always been jealous of me. Jealous because I had the family, the friends, the life you could never have." I looked directly into her eyes. "If that's what you believe, then there's nothing I can say to change your mind." The calmness of my response seemed to push her over the edge. Years earlier, she could provoke me into crying. Years earlier, she could hurt me with a few cruel words. But she wasn't dealing with that girl anymore, and deep down she was starting to realize it. Her face tightened. "Look at you acting superior," she snapped. "You think you're better than everyone now?" I shook my head. "No, I just don't need to prove anything anymore." The sentence hit harder than I intended. Several people nearby exchanged glances. Savannah noticed it immediately. Suddenly, she wasn't controlling the situation anymore. The attention she desperately wanted was shifting away from her, and Savannah hated losing control. "Don't need to prove anything," she repeated. "That's rich coming from you." Then she laughed loudly and pointed at me. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce my pathetic half-sister. The same girl who got thrown out of her own house because nobody could stand her anymore. A few uncomfortable chuckles followed. Most people remained silent now. The mood had changed. The joke wasn't funny anymore. It was cruel. For the first time all evening, I noticed my father standing nearby. He had been watching the entire exchange. Part of me wondered whether he would finally say something after all these years. Maybe age had changed him. Maybe experience had taught him regret. Maybe seeing his daughter publicly humiliated would awaken something inside him. Instead, he simply looked away. That hurt less than I expected. Perhaps because I no longer needed his approval. Perhaps because I had already mourned that relationship years ago. Savannah followed my gaze and smirked. She knew exactly what I had been hoping for. "See," she said quietly, "nothing's changed." Then she turned back toward the crowd. "She still doesn't belong here." The words echoed through the ballroom. For a second, everything felt strangely familiar. The judgment, the laughter, the rejection. 14 years earlier, those things would have destroyed me. 14 years earlier, I would have begged someone to listen. But standing there now, I felt something completely different. Peace. I knew who I was. I knew what I had built. Most importantly, I knew that none of these people had any power over me anymore. Savannah mistook that peace for weakness. Her smile widened. "Maybe you should leave," she said. "Honestly, you're embarrassing yourself." I looked at her quietly. "If that's what you want." For some reason, my willingness to walk away enraged her. Maybe she wanted tears. Maybe she wanted an argument. Whatever she wanted, she wasn't getting it. Then, without warning, her expression darkened. "You know what?" she snapped. "I'm tired of this." Before anyone could react, her hand shot upward. The slap echoed across the ballroom like a gunshot. My head turned slightly from the impact. A sharp sting spread across my cheek. For 1 second, complete silence filled the room. Then came the laughter. Some guests gasped. Others covered their mouths. A few actually laughed openly as if they had just witnessed entertainment instead of humiliation. Savannah stood there breathing heavily, satisfied with herself. "Trash belongs outside," she said coldly. "And that's exactly where you belong." I slowly turned my head back toward her. My cheek burned, but my expression never changed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I simply looked at her. The laughter gradually faded as people realized I wasn't reacting. Savannah seemed confused by my silence. Then she leaned closer and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "You never belonged in this family. You never will." At that exact moment, another voice suddenly cut through the crowd. "Do you even know who she is?" The voice was sharp, powerful, and filled with disbelief. Instantly, the entire ballroom fell silent. Every guest turned toward the speaker. Savannah froze. I slowly looked past her shoulder and saw a man stepping forward through the crowd. It was her fiancé. And judging by the look on his face, everything was about to change. The ballroom fell completely silent. Even the musicians stopped playing. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Every pair of eyes shifted toward the man standing near the center of the room. It was Ethan Cole, Savannah's fiancé. Just minutes earlier, he had been greeting guests and smiling for photographs. Now his expression was completely different. His face was pale, his jaw was tight, and there was genuine disbelief in his eyes as he stared directly at me. Savannah blinked in confusion and forced out a nervous laugh. "Ethan, what are you doing?" she asked. "Relax, it's just family business." He didn't even look at her. His attention remained fixed on me. "Family business?" he repeated quietly. Then he shook his head. "No. This is much bigger than family business." A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. People looked from him to me and back again, trying to understand what was happening. Savannah stepped closer to him and grabbed his arm. "Ethan, stop making this dramatic," she said. "She's nobody." The moment those words left her mouth, something changed in his expression. His eyes narrowed and he slowly turned toward her. "Nobody," he said. "You honestly think she's nobody?" The room became even quieter. Ethan took a slow breath as if trying to process what he had just witnessed. Then he looked at me again. "Miss Hart," he said respectfully. Hearing those words made several guests exchange confused glances. Most people there knew me only as Savannah's forgotten half-sister. The respect in Ethan's voice immediately caught their attention. Savannah looked completely lost now. "Why are you calling her that?" she demanded. "What is wrong with you?" Ethan ignored the question. His eyes remained on me as if he was waiting for confirmation. I gave him a small nod. That was enough. He closed his eyes briefly and exhaled. When he opened them again, the disbelief had been replaced by certainty. "My God," he muttered. "I can't believe this." Savannah laughed again, but this time the sound was strained and nervous. "Believe what?" she asked. "Will somebody tell me what's going on?" Ethan finally turned toward the crowd. Hundreds of guests watched him in complete silence. "Do any of you know who this woman is?" he asked. Nobody answered. Several people shook their heads. Ethan nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." Savannah folded her arms impatiently. "Fine," she snapped. "Enough of the mystery. Who is she supposed to be?" Ethan stared at her for a long moment before speaking. "She's Elena Hart," he said, "founder and CEO of Hartwell International Group." The words landed like a bomb. Several guests gasped immediately. Others looked confused for a moment before recognition appeared on their faces. Hartwell International Group wasn't just another company. It was one of the fastest-growing global corporations in the business world. The company owned logistics networks, technology firms, and international development projects worth billions of dollars. Over the last decade, its success had been featured in business magazines across the world. Savannah stared at Ethan as if he had started speaking another language. Then she laughed. "That's impossible." Her voice cracked slightly. "You're joking." Ethan didn't smile. "Do I look like I'm joking?" The nervous laughter around the room disappeared instantly. People began whispering furiously. Phones appeared in hands as guests started searching online. Within seconds, expressions changed all around the ballroom. Shock, confusion, disbelief. My father looked like he had stopped breathing. My stepmother's face drained of color. Savannah kept shaking her head. "No," she repeated. "No, that's not possible. She left with nothing." Ethan nodded. "That's true, she did leave with nothing." Then he looked directly at Savannah. "The difference is that she built everything herself." More whispers spread through the room. I could see guests pulling up articles and photographs on their phones. Many of them were now comparing those images to the woman standing in front of them. Some recognized me immediately. Others were just beginning to understand. Savannah noticed it too. Her confidence started crumbling right before everyone's eyes. "You're lying," she whispered. "You have to be lying." Ethan shook his head. "I've attended international conferences where CEOs waited hours to meet her. I've watched governments negotiate contracts with her company. I've seen boardrooms full of powerful people stand up when she entered the room. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had happened all night. For the first time since I arrived, nobody was looking at me with pity or amusement. They were looking at me with respect. Ironically, I felt exactly the same as before. Success had changed my circumstances, but it hadn't changed who I was. Savannah, however, was falling apart. "Alina," she said suddenly, turning toward me. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I looked at her calmly. "Because it wasn't important." The answer hit her harder than the revelation itself. Her entire life had revolved around appearances, status, and recognition. She couldn't understand someone who didn't need those things. "Not important?" she repeated. "How could that not be important?" I smiled slightly. "Because I didn't come here to impress anyone." The room remained silent as everyone absorbed those words. Then Ethan slowly looked at Savannah again. There was disappointment in his eyes now, deep disappointment. "You slapped her," he said quietly. "You humiliated her in front of hundreds of people because you thought she had nothing." Savannah immediately grabbed his hand. "Ethan, please," she said desperately. "You don't understand." He pulled his hand away. "No," he replied. "I understand perfectly." The panic on her face became impossible to hide. "It was just a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "I was upset. Weddings are stressful." Ethan stared at her. "Stress doesn't make people cruel." Savannah looked around desperately for support. "Mom?" she called. "Dad?" My father stepped forward immediately. "Son," he began carefully. "Let's not overreact. Families argue sometimes." Ethan turned toward him. "You threw her out of your house when she was 16, didn't you?" My father froze. The question hit him like a punch. "That was years ago," he muttered. "And you've spent every year since pretending she doesn't exist," Ethan replied. Nobody spoke after that. The truth was hanging openly in the middle of the ballroom now, impossible to ignore. My stepmother tried to smile. "We all make mistakes," she said weakly. Ethan looked at her, then at Savannah. "Some mistakes show you exactly who people are." Savannah's eyes filled with tears. Whether they were genuine tears or simply another attempt to manipulate the situation, I couldn't tell. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this." Ethan looked exhausted, like a man who had just discovered something terrible about someone he thought he knew. "Do what?" he asked quietly. "Tell the truth?" She shook her head rapidly. "You're ruining everything." Ethan laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "No, Savannah," he said. "I'm not ruining anything." Then he glanced toward me before looking back at her. "You already did that yourself." The room became silent once again. I could see the realization spreading across Savannah's face. For the first time all night, she understood that she had lost control of the situation completely. The woman she spent years looking down on was now the most respected person in the room. The guests who laughed moments earlier were avoiding eye contact. The relatives who ignored me suddenly looked uncomfortable. And standing directly in front of her was the man she planned to marry, looking at her like a stranger. Then Ethan said 4 words that changed everything. "I can't marry you." The entire ballroom gasped. "I can't marry you." The words echoed through the ballroom like a thunderclap. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Savannah stared at Ethan as if she had misunderstood what he said. Then she laughed nervously and shook her head. "Stop," she whispered. "This isn't funny." Ethan's expression didn't change. "I'm not joking." The reality of the situation slowly began settling over the room. 400 guests sat frozen in their seats while the bride stood in the middle of the ballroom watching her wedding collapse in real time. Savannah grabbed Ethan's arm again, but this time there was desperation in her eyes. "You can't do this," she said. "The ceremony is over." Everyone is here. Our families are here. Ethan gently pulled away from her grip. Exactly, he replied. And now I've seen who you really are. Tears began streaming down Savannah's face. You're ending everything because of one argument, she cried. Ethan shook his head. No. I'm ending this because humiliating someone in public, laughing while others join in, and treating people as if they're worthless isn't an argument. It's a choice. And tonight you showed everyone exactly what kind of person you choose to be. The ballroom remained silent as Savannah looked around desperately for someone to help her. Mom, she cried. Dad. My father stepped forward immediately, his face filled with panic. Ethan, let's calm down, he said. People make mistakes. This can be fixed. Ethan looked directly at him. Can it? He asked quietly. Because from what I've learned tonight, this behavior didn't start tonight. It started years ago. My father couldn't answer. My stepmother tried next. Please, she said. Don't throw away your future because of a misunderstanding. Ethan let out a slow breath. A misunderstanding would be accidentally saying something hurtful. A misunderstanding would be miscommunication. What happened tonight wasn't a misunderstanding. Your daughter publicly humiliated someone she believed had no value. The only reason she's upset now is because she discovered she was wrong. Those words hit the room like another shockwave. Several guests lowered their heads. They knew he was right. Then something happened that I never expected. Savannah turned toward me. Her makeup was beginning to run, and her confident smile had completely disappeared. For the first time in her life, she looked genuinely afraid. Alina, she said softly, please. The entire ballroom turned toward me. Every eye was watching. Years ago, I would have given anything to hear her say my name without hatred in her voice. Years ago, I would have done anything to earn acceptance from these people. But standing there now, I felt nothing except peace. Please talk to him, she continued. Tell him this isn't who I am. The irony was almost unbelievable. The same woman who had slapped me minutes earlier was now asking for my help. My father stepped closer. Alina, he said carefully. We know mistakes were made in the past. I nearly laughed at the way he phrased it. Mistakes. 14 years of rejection reduced to a single word. But this is your sister's future, he continued. You can stop this. My stepmother nodded quickly. Please, just tell him she's a good person. I looked at all of them for several seconds. The father who abandoned me. The stepmother who watched it happen. The sister who spent years treating me like garbage. Now they were all standing in front of me asking for help. Finally I spoke. This has nothing to do with me. My voice was calm and steady. Savannah's face fell immediately. I turned toward Ethan. This is your decision, I said, not mine. Ethan nodded slowly. That's exactly what I think. Savannah broke down completely. No, she cried. Please don't do this. Ethan looked at her sadly. I already have. Then he removed his wedding ring and placed it on a nearby table. The small metallic sound seemed louder than any music that had filled the ballroom all evening. Gasps spread through the crowd. The wedding was over. Just like that, Savannah collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. My father rushed toward her while guests began whispering among themselves. Some looked shocked, others looked embarrassed. A few quietly gathered their belongings and started leaving. Nobody was celebrating anymore. The perfect wedding that Savannah had spent months planning was falling apart before everyone's eyes. I could have stayed and watched. Part of me even thought I deserved to. After everything they had done, nobody would have blamed me for enjoying the moment, but revenge no longer interested me. The truth had already done all the work for me. Without saying another word, I picked up my purse and began walking toward the exit. Wait, my father's voice stopped me halfway across the ballroom. For a moment I considered ignoring him. Then I turned around. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller somehow. The confident man who once pointed at the door and threw me out of his house was gone. In his place stood someone carrying years of regret. I'm sorry, he said quietly. The room became silent again. I stared at him for several seconds. Those were the words I had dreamed about hearing when I was 16 years old. Those were the words I cried myself to sleep hoping for. But time changes things. Some apologies arrive after they've lost their power. I know, I said. His eyes widened slightly. You know? He asked. I nodded. You've been sorry for a long time. Tears appeared in his eyes. Can you forgive me? The question hung in the air between us. I thought about it carefully. Then I smiled. I forgave you years ago. Relief immediately washed across his face. But before he could speak again, I continued. Forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing. The relief disappeared. I don't hate you anymore, I said. I don't carry anger anymore. But that doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. My father lowered his head. Deep down, I think he already knew that. Some bridges can never be rebuilt exactly as they were. Some damage lasts forever. Not because people refuse to heal, but because healing teaches them they deserve better. I walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air. For the first time all evening, I felt completely free. The past was finally behind me. Not because my family had changed. Not because they suddenly respected me. But because I no longer needed anything from them. Their approval didn't matter. Their opinions didn't matter. Their acceptance didn't matter. I had built my own life, my own future, my own family of friends, colleagues, and people who valued me for who I was rather than what they could gain from me. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. One short message appeared on the screen. "I'm sorry for what happened tonight. You deserved better." I looked at the message for a moment before smiling. Then I typed a simple reply. "I know." I started the engine and drove away from the hotel without looking back. Behind me, a wedding had ended. Ahead of me, the rest of my life was waiting, and for the first time since I was 16 years old, I felt absolutely certain of one thing. The people who threw me away had finally learned my value. The difference was that by then, I no longer needed them to.